Okay, so the new costumes, or at least some of them, for the 15th Doctor are very 70s inspired, as well as Doctor Who has gone back to the logo that was first used in the 1970s. So for my first 15th Doctor inspired outfit, I am going to use a sewing pattern that is from the early 70s, 1973, I think. So I'm going to be making a dress that kind of looks like 15's Christmas outfit for his first Christmas special. Now, this pattern is not my size, but the way that I am going to make it work is that I'm going to cut out the pattern pieces and lay them onto a bunch of taped together pieces of construction paper and do the necessary measurements to trace the new lines outside of the original pieces onto the paper so that I have new pattern pieces that are the right size. In order to use this pattern, but in a way where it will fit me. So for the outfit, now the dress is mostly going to look like the pants and top of 15's Christmas outfit. So the leather coat and the shoes are not a factor in the color scheme for this dress. I'm going to use this blue for the bottom, the skirt of the dress, because he's got some very blue pants. And the top, in some lights, looks more red, and in others looks a little bit more like a, not exactly orange, but more like a salmon color. And I don't have any fabric that comes close to that, so I am just going to use pink. For the stripes, some of the stripes are blue, so I will use this same blue fabric for those stripes. There are some orangey kind of stripes, although in some lights they look yellow. But I do have some orange fabric, so I will use that. I do have some solid red scrap fabric somewhere, I don't know where, but of those scraps I think there is enough that I can have a couple of red stripes in there as well. For the stripes across the top, they also have stitch lines, very visible stitch lines that are very clearly there for artistic reasons. So I think I will use blue thread for the entire dress so that the stitch lines across the stripes on the top are very visible. So adding these stripes is really the only thing that I'm adding, but other than that I am going to be following that pattern pretty much exactly, except for, of course, sizing it up like I said. So I will show you a little bit of the process of making the pattern pieces bigger, and I will show you a little bit of pinning everything in place. I have sewn all my other projects this year by hand because I didn't want to deal with the machine, but I'm really going to try to force myself to use the sewing machine this time. So I'm currently cutting out the pattern pieces since when I bought this pattern they arrived in the original paper, so they were not cut out, so I have to do that. This pattern does require using facing, and I don't have interfacing, so for where it tells me to use interfacing on the front and back of the bodice, I'm just going to use pieces of the fabric to create facing, and I will add some seam allowance to flip it over on the sides so that the raw edge of the fabric is not exposed at all in the facing. This dress also requires a zipper, and out of my collection this is the one that I found that kind of looks close to the original color of the top in 15's Christmas outfit, so I kind of got lucky there. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but it is an option that you can put decorative buttons on the dress, and I do have these vintage buttons in my collection because when I was looking for the zipper, I came across some of my buttons. I immediately, when I saw them, realized that these could be a nice reference to the shoes, because 15's shoes with that outfit are white with colorful stripes, and these buttons are a white base with a colorful, almost flower-looking design. Ideally, I would want 1 or 2 buttons on each cuff and then 3 along the chest, which I can't do because there's only 4 here. So I either put 3 on the chest and have a spare, or I put 2 close together on the chest so that it's obvious that there's only supposed to be 2 and then 1 on each cuff. Or the other alternative is that I could choose 3 buttons of a solid color from my collection and have 1 of these buttons on each cuff along with 1 solid button, and then 2 of these colorful ones on the chest with a 3rd one in the middle that is a solid color. But I don't know if I would end up liking how that looks, so I guess I'll decide on that later. I don't think I said it earlier, but with the dress, I am doing the shorter variation. So it's not going to be long, it's going to be probably not knee length the way that it's depicted here, because I am short. I am 5'3", so the skirt might be a little bit longer depending on how I hem it. Okay, so I have cut out the new pattern pieces for the front panel of the skirt, the back panel, the front panel for the bodice, and the back panel, plus the sleeve. The original pattern pieces you see there is the cuff at the end of the sleeves, the collar, and the front and back facing. Now, I am going to cut the fabric out using the original pattern pieces for those parts of the dress, because I believe that I do not need to increase any measurements for the cuffs, collar, or facings. For people who don't sew, facings, which just means stuff made out of inner facing, which I don't have, so I'm just using more fabric for the facings. That's inside the dress. Facings are inside garments that you make, so they're not visible. And I don't think I need to increase the measurements for these at all, so I will just cut the fabric using these, but for the rest of it, I have the increased measurement pieces that I've made, which does not include seam allowance. So when I'm cutting that fabric out, I will have to measure the seam allowance on the side of the pattern piece where the side seam would be, the same way that I measured for the increased measurements to cut these out of the original pieces there. So once that's done, once that's all cut out, I will then be able to start pinning it together, and then the sewing starts. Okay, so I have all the pieces cut out now, and the 2 front panel bodice pieces I have also sewed the darts for, but you can kind of see those pencil markings there that when I sewed them, in order to get them lined up at the bottom, I couldn't actually follow the pencil lines for the darts. So the breasts are a little bit more pointy, almost like a bullet bra shape. So I don't know, I may have to play around with that to get that fitting well, but the pencil markings aren't gonna matter too much because pencil does wash out, and also they're only over the seam lines. Where the darts are misaligned, I am putting the stripes on the front, like I said, so you don't have to worry about that. I did mean to actually film the pieces of fabric that I had cut out before I started doing any sewing, but I got a little bit ahead of myself. Okay, so the sleeves are done. They're not attached, but they are done. And the front and back pieces of the bodice are sewn together except at the top there. For the stripes, I thought of a few different ways to do it. I thought of like measuring with the piece against the dress form. But because the dress form doesn't fit my breast size exactly, I can't measure to account for how the dart changes the shape so that the stripes are all like the same width still. Because I would have to pin it like right against the dress form, and it being a little bit too small in the breasts makes that a problem. And then I thought about measuring against the pattern piece that I'd cut this out from, but the problem is that the dart ended up, in order for me to sew it so that this piece was lined up after, the dart doesn't totally like follow it, so that would mean that there would still be a problem with getting the stripes to be aligned. So I think what I'm gonna actually end up doing is making them sort of like bias tape, where I cut them out and I measure the amount of like width that the stripe is supposed to show, and then seam allowance on the outside that gets folded over and stitched down, and just one by one attach them, having the piece against myself when it gets to the point with the dart, so that I can then pin it to follow that shape and just put the stripes on one by one, and making them much longer than they need to be to account for seam allowance on the top and bottom, and extra length for when it gets to the darts, because that means that some of the stripe pieces will have to have darts once it reaches that point. The stripes on the front are going to end once they reach the sleeve, which is why I did sew them together here, because the stripes aren't going that far on the front pieces. And in the original picture, the stripes don't begin right away in the middle where the zipper on the front of it is. On my dress, the zipper's in the back, but you get what I mean. So the stripes are not going to begin right away. There's going to be like a little bit of just the pink fabric before the stripes begin. And I might not be able to find that scrap red fabric, nor do I think, looking at it now, that that scrap red fabric is actually enough for the length that these stripes need to be. So I think what I am going to do is cut out some stripes of more of this pink fabric to go in between the blue and the orange, just so that the section with stripes all has the same thickness, rather than just not putting a stripe over where it's supposed to be pink, because then that would be an issue, since this fabric is kind of thin. So having some extra thickness in the bust would probably be better. So I think that is how I'm going to do the stripes, and then once I do the stripes, I can sew the top together, which means that I can sew the sleeves to the arms. And then after that, I will figure out how I'm going to sew the rest of it together. And also, because these are slip-on sleeves, and they really don't need buttons, because there are only 4 of those colorful buttons that I showed before, I think I am just going to sew all 4 of them right under where the collar opens up at the bust. Alright, so this is half of the bodice completed with one of the sleeves attached. I have to finish sewing on the stripes and attach the sleeve to the other side before I can attach the fully sewn skirt here. And then put the zipper in the back, attach the collar. The different pieces of the collar are here. So this is kind of like my fault. I kind of asked for this by not forcing myself to use the sewing machine and just doing it by hand, because I'm more relaxed if I'm able to do it by hand, but then it takes longer. And I wanted to have this video out on the 24th, Christmas Eve, and by extension have the dress done by then, but it is currently the 25th. It is Christmas Day, and I already watched the special. So I think to give myself a little bit less grief, I'm going to give myself a bit of a break and have the next clip I show you after this one just be when the dress is fully complete, so that I don't have to worry about getting my camera in between doing the rest of the different steps, and can just do the rest of this without worrying about the video aspect of the project, because I already feel like super burnt out. So yeah. Alright, so here is the dress. It looks okay on the dress form. I definitely do have to make a couple modifications to get it to fit properly, but I am happy with it, despite that it took a ridiculously long time to make. This is the first time that I've ever upsized a vintage pattern, so I would say I did pretty well. I am proud of it. I did try it on, and it fits pretty well for the most part. For the collar to lay the way that I want it to, as you can see on the dress form, I need to make some modifications so that it sits perfectly that way when I'm wearing it. So yeah, I gotta tweak it a little bit, but the finished product here looks good enough that I'm satisfied with leaving you on this ending clip. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.